go ahead and get started. Matt and Scott, I'm just going to ask if we can add one additional thing to the agenda for tonight. And this is part of the election wrap-up, but we had a couple of precincts this election where there were some issues that I think we can just kind of discuss and decide what we want to do there with that. One was space, the other was construction. So when we get to that, we can talk about that. Okay. All right, so it is now officially 5:09 p.m. and I'm going to call this meeting to order on December 8th, 2022.
Madam Chair, I'm going to slip out. I'll see you next month for the vote for the new board members.
Hey, thank you.
Congratulations,
One of
Matt.
Montini for the road.
I had my share.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Please don't help yourselves if you haven't already.
Okay, so we need to adopt the minutes from our previous meeting. Did you get a chance to take a look at those minutes?
So moved.
All right, perfect. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, so minutes from the September 15th, 2022 meeting are adopted. Okay, so now we're going to go into the main event, or the second main event of tonight, which is the election wrap-up. Gretchen, I'm going to go ahead and let you take the lead on this.
Okay, for those of you that are here, we do have some copies of our post-election report available in the center of the table. We also did post this on our website. So this was something that we started in 2019, just to do a quick overview on some data for this election. So I'm just going to go through it quickly with some highlights focusing on the highlights from 2022. So I know that the first page we talk about voter registration trends in Arlington County. And as you can see, the main source of registration in Arlington is the Department of Motor Vehicles, with more than 75% of voters registering through the DMV. The next is voters registering online through that citizen portal that the Department of Elections provide. And then the rest of voters are coming in through other ways. So I know one of the big stories leading up to this election was the delay in registration transactions from the Department of Motor Vehicles, basically from May until September of this year. There were about 6,000 applications in Arlington County that were delayed. We did not see any evidence that this caused any issues for voters on election day. We were able to process the transactions internally, thanks to the good team that we have here. So it took us about 5 days to process the first batch and 2 days to process the second batch. And voters received their notifications of where to vote. And then in the provisional data, like I said, we didn't see any indication of significant issues of being caused by voters who didn't get their registrations processed in time. Does that make sense? Okay. So for this election, we did have 50% of voters, of active voters, participate in this election, and a majority of voters are choosing to vote on election day, with 64% voting on election day. And then we are seeing an increase in the number choosing to vote before election day. This remains consistent with the increases we've been seeing over the past couple of years. So we have not, we do anticipate that at some point we'll level off. So we'll have voters that'll choose to vote early versus election day versus by mail. But right now we haven't seen it to start level off. We just keep seeing pretty dramatic increases in voters shifting from election day to voting by mail or early. So we anticipate that trend increasing still, if that makes sense. Okay. So we did mail 16,000 ballots for this election. We ended up counting, that 16,000 does include any reissues, ballots for the voters reported lost or spoiled. And it does include ballots that are emailed to overseas voters. We do have a relatively large portion of our voters a large number of voters who reside overseas as a result of their job through the State Department, the Pentagon, or things like that. We did count 12,000 mail ballots, and we rejected 323. The rejections were caused by material omissions. The number one reason for rejection is a lack of a witness signature. That is the main reason we are rejecting mail ballots. So a majority of voters who voted by mail did return their ballots by mail. And then 3,000 chose to return them in person to one of our drop boxes. The drop box here at Courthouse is the most popular, followed by Central Library and Westover Library. And that's consistent with previous elections. There were around 1,000 voters who requested mail ballots but chose to then come vote in person, either early election day or had to cast a provisional ballot on election day. In terms of ballots rejected, like I said, we have a pretty low rejection rate of only about 1% of ballots are rejected by the scanner. Those are ultimately counted by hand by a team of 2 election officers.
All right.
In terms of early voting, we were open for early voting for 45 days here at Courthouse, our main location. And then we added additional locations 2 weeks before the election. You can see the numbers. They are pretty evenly split between Walter Reed and Madison. And then obviously the increase at Courthouse is mainly because we're just open so many more days here. So. The wait times during early voting hit around 20 minutes the last Friday that we were open here at Courthouse, but that was really the only time that I'm aware of that it hit 20 minutes at any one of our voting sites. And it was a surprise. We were not used to seeing a Friday rush the Friday before the election. That was definitely new for us this year. We did hire around 458 election officers to work on election day. We did start assignments. We had over 570 in our initial round of assignments. So over the course of the election, we did end up losing around 120 election officers. Most significantly, between the Friday before the election and election day, we lost around 50 election officers, including 12 officers in key positions of a chief, assistant chief, or a registration clerk. Most of that was caused by, at least in the leadership positions, it was caused by illness of people who came down with flu-like symptoms that weekend before the election and they just weren't able to work. This is probably one of the highest dropout rates I've seen in Arlington, which is a concern. And it's one of the factors that we'll need to keep an eye on as we are still in this kind of triple-demic situation. A majority of our election officers rated their chiefs as good or excellent, and they thought their training was good and that they were sufficiently staffed for this election, even with the dropouts that we did see. We do tend to add a person or 2 just so that we can absorb the dropouts. Okay, so let's see. Okay, provisional ballots. That is the story of this election. So we had around a 400% increase in the number of provisional ballots issued this election as compared to the election last year. That was a result of same-day registration. Arlington had one of the highest total numbers of same-day registrations in the Commonwealth. And when we analyzed the data to try to dig a little bit deeper into same-day registrations, what we saw is that 60 voters under the age of 35 accounted for 69% of provisional ballots cast in Arlington. So this is clearly an age-related demographic issue of, for whatever reason, voters under the age of 35 aren't registering in advance of this election. So, you know. And this is consistent with, I know VPAP released data about same-day registration from across the Commonwealth, and voters with the highest percentage of provisional ballots cast all were places where universities were located. So while Arlington County, you wouldn't say it's necessarily home to university, but we do have Marymount, Mason, George GW. We have a lot of graduate programs and university programs here in Arlington County. And we do have a younger population compared to the rest of Virginia. In terms of gender breakdown, we did see a slightly higher number of women casting provisional ballots. I think it was around 54% of provisional ballots were cast by women as opposed to men. But that's really the only interesting data that we have about same-day registrations at this point. We are still continuing to look at it. But yeah, any questions about that?
All very interesting, very
Yeah.
relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This report was your creation.
Tanya.
All right.
Thank you, Tanya.
And going back to last year,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking,
Yeah.
your idea.
Yeah.
And certainly helpful to us. Every page has relevant information that you can put to good use throughout the year.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much.
Yeah.
And this is going to be available online as
It's
well?
on the website and
Awesome.
it's in the electoral board minutes. That's where we include it. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so the next piece of this that I want to talk about is, so we had two locations. Met Park was one because of the construction. And then the other one was precinct 131, which is the
Westover Library.
Right, so let's start with Met Park. Takis, I think you can speak more to the issues.
Oh, yeah.
Some what you observed there.
Sure. I wasn't planning to, but I was there several times of the day. So the location is under construction. So the surroundings of the location are under construction. There are chain link fences, etc. So the location was only approachable from one place. It was a significantly popular location, I have to say, from traffic I've seen until the very last minute. Number one problem, which is a real one, the accessibility for people with mobility challenges was problematic. For everybody who was coming from one part, especially from, I would say, north to the location, it was there was no sidewalk access, and it was not clear what a pedestrian should do to come in, and it was not clear where exactly the entrance of the polling place is. There were a couple of signs, but I do think that, putting them on the chain link fence and making an extra effort when we have such a challenge there is extremely important. Maybe a better coordination even with our side to make sure that the Clark Construction du jour understands what the issue is, would be necessary there. So a lot of wayfinding issues, etc. For people, again, with people with impairments, a couple of blind voters I met who needed, literally somebody else to help them to find the place. It was absolutely impossible to do that otherwise. And for those who have mobility impairments, we have to really make sure that everything is accessible.
Thank you. And so we know that sometime soon, construction at that location is going to wrap up.
Oh, I pray every day of the show for soon a safe end of this. So yes, but it is a good thing for basically for the troubleshooting routine that needs to go. I mean, I really literally think that the biggest problem was safety for the pedestrian access. People had to literally walk on the street. And wayfinding, you cannot do enough, but wayfinding so that people understand how to get to the point. Basically, come from a relatively obvious direction.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Very helpful and timely.
Thank you, especially since there's a lot of construction going on in Arlington, and it's going to affect our voting locations, that's good.
That area is a cause for concern. I think, yeah, the whole Pentagon Crystal City area, just the rate that it's growing, is a cause for, like I said, it's definitely a red area for me, in terms of adequate number of polling places, just by the sheer number of apartment buildings going up there, so.
If on occasion we have to let ACPD know that a street has to be closed so that it's safe to walk, we will do that.
Okay, and I
It's
know
not
that
a
we
big deal.
did that in
It's okay.
2020. We actually took check-in outside in 2020. We had them set outside with the one set, so, yeah. But that location needs to be split because it's just growing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not going to be long before the number of voters there just can't vote in the physical space there, so.
Yeah, and what Gretchen is referring to in terms of splitting that precinct is, by law, there has to be a certain number of voters within a precinct. And that's why we've gone from 39 to 54. So, so that's what that is. And the next one is precinct 131 Westover. We know that was kind of a last minute because it was originally.
Mary's on the phone if you want to have Mary speak
Yeah,
to it.
Mary, if you want to speak to this issue.
Hi, can you hear me, Mary Detweiler?
Yes.
Yes, hi. Thanks for addressing this. Yes, we want to thank, first off, all the work that went into putting these two polling sites who had been at other places for a couple of years. Both had to find a new place to vote, and both were accommodated at this one building complex. Everything was very happy for the Overly Knolls people. That's precinct 117. They went back to their home turf of a couple of years ago at what used to be the Reed School, now the Cardinal Elementary School. They were in a beautiful room. Everything's fine. It was a challenge having two sets of voters, both coming to the same area, both given the same address to come vote, but we had a lot of volunteers trying to steer them into the right spot. And the one problem that we discovered, and we knew it was coming, but we really had no choice, we know that at the time, but for Lexington, which is number 131 precinct, the voting area that they were given inside the Westover Branch Library, the only room available to them was what's called the conference room. And technically, I think on the wall it says you can put 30 people in there. That's assuming that everybody pre-COVID is squeezed in there together for some kind of a meeting, maybe theater style, whatever. But as far as a voting room goes, it really is not big enough for the kind of privacy that people expect when they're completing their ballots at a carol. In the old days where this particular precinct used to be, they actually had the carols lined up so that the people's backs as they were filling out the ballots were almost against a wall. So there was very little chance of lack of privacy there. This little room, you really could only have a certain number of people in there if you had your check-in desk, other desk in there, the carols that have to be filled out, the scanners that need to be used, all in that one very small room. And inevitably, it's going to mean a lot of people lining up in the hallway ahead of time, or just not being able to do what they normally would do and move everybody through that. So we are concerned particularly for a presidential year like 2024, when there will be not 50% of our voters or 60% or whatever number in Lexington voted, but it will be a much larger percentage. And we fear that that's going to cause some complaints. So we bring that up to wonder if there are any other options. And a couple of us did get permission to go into the school and met the principal and had somebody who got permission to take a few of us in. And we looked around at other rooms inside the school, not really thinking that was where we wanted to go with this, but being open to the idea. And lo and behold, we were very pleasantly surprised to see that gymnasium, which is, I think, the largest gymnasium I have ever seen in an elementary school. And we discovered that not only is that a huge room, it has a non-transparent cloth mesh that can drop down from the center of the gym, dividing the entire gymnasium into two very large equal spaces. On top of that, it has doors, 3 doors leading directly from the gymnasium out to the eastern end of the building, which is where the children's playing fields is, and the parking lot to the school is located. So you could technically have all voters going in through one of those 3 doors, going out. They're double doors. They could serve for both entrance and exit and choose whichever ones of the 3 are to be used. One could have a complete circular loop coming from the parking lot, people that walk into that, whatever. You could have easy guidance as to which door, because they're only a matter of feet apart, which door voters should go into. They go in, they do their voting, they come back out one of those doors. They never go anywhere inside the rest of the school. The entire thing can be a closed loop, protecting the school from having people going down its corridors and whatever. So we were concerned about having voters voting in 2 polling sites that were next to one another. And now we have flipped the whole thing on its head and said, we think maybe this is worth exploring, having 2 polling sites voting next to one another in even closer proximity. So if the school were open to the idea, Overly Knowles 117 would no longer vote at their library. That would open up that, keep voters from inside the building over there. And it would solve the problem of a small voting site for the Lexington 131 and actually make it rather easy, we think, for both polling sites to vote in the same location, but separate, quite separate. So we wanted just to put that on the table for people to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Any thoughts? When we first approached Cardinal School, the principal did not allow us access to the gym, which is why the 117 precinct is in the school's library. Yeah, so that's, like I said, we're more than happy to go back to the school and see if the gym is on the table. I do have concerns with putting both polling locations in the same room because code says that if you have polling locations in the same building, they have to be in separate defined spaces. So that to me indicates that you can't have it be one in one side of the gym and one in the other side of the gym. So I'm not sure that option is legal under the code. So I'd have to look into it more. So.
Yeah, something to look into.
Yeah.
My name is Ann Spiker, and I was with Mary and others when we visited. If you wanted to see some pictures of the gym and also the outside doors, I would be happy to.
We would. I mean, thank you. Yeah,
obviously you'll have to look at it again, but I mean, you can see how big the space is.
Yeah.
And it would be.
Yeah. Did you speak to the principal?
He took us around. Yeah.
Okay. It's always fascinating. The principals, when we go to things, they say no. So we hear no a lot from the schools, if I'm being honest. So.
Well, I think as I understood it, one of the considerations was if school is closed on election day, that.
It's not for special election or the June. I think June, they upped their calendar this year though, and they are no longer going to be in session. I think school ends the week before the June primary for the first year ever, but that's, yeah. So, but then we have to worry about summer schools. That was the issue.
Gretchen, my precinct's at an elementary school, and for June, they were already gone. They actually were so gone that the bathrooms didn't have paper towels in them until I asked them to put some back.
Yeah. So, thank you, Dominic.
Okay, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Takis, and we'll definitely,
Continue to look into it.
yeah, we'll let staff take the reins of that and continue that work that they do trying to find ADA accessible appropriate voting locations around the county, so. Okay.
Can I have a quick comment and question about the report?
Yes.
Before we move on to the next one? Again, thank you for the report. thought the information was fascinating, especially the provisional data information. As you mentioned, that was the story of the election, and I think it was 4 or 5 times as many as usual. I mean, it was well over 2,000. We had so many, we even had a competition to see who could process the most.
We won't talk about who won that one.
I'm happy to see the 1,935 people who cast provisional ballots because of same-day registration were able to have their vote counted this year. They wouldn't have been able to do so last year. So I think it's great. The question I have is, do you think the huge influx we had this year was because it was the first year we had this? Or do you think it's going to be similar in all future years? Obviously, 2024, I think we're going to have thousands. But what do you think the pattern's going to be?
The impression that I have is that it is going to increase. The more voters are aware of their option to just register and vote at the same time.
Right.
I think it will only increase. And because we are a transient area and a lot of places have same-day registration, so DC and Maryland, we being the main case here locally, voters don't necessarily, so this younger population, it's not even, they don't even know that there's a deadline by which they need to register because maybe they came from a state that doesn't have a registration deadline. So I just think that the issue, it's only going to increase. It's only going up. I don't see it going down.
Yeah, and I would imagine since so many of them were between the ages of 18 and 24, 25 and 34, they're going to move before the next election, certainly before 2024. They won't know the need, they need to update the registration.
And that's one of those data points that I just haven't had time to go through all the data because I can't, it's not like I can run a report easily from our system, but to categorize them as somebody who's new to Virginia versus somebody who's moved in from another jurisdiction versus somebody who's just moved within Arlington County. And I do think it's about half and half were new and half were already registered somewhere else in the Commonwealth, whether it was Arlington County or another jurisdiction. So, but without having gone through all, 2,000 records yet, I'm only at about precinct 4 on that data, so it takes a while.
Thank you.
Just to build on Matt's question, I thought the election office did a great job handling that, and then the board did a heroic effort counting them. But even with all of that, and it wasn't, again, no fault of yours, it took almost a week. So if there had been a close election, or it had been a statewide or a national, then we would be waiting on the results, and it wasn't just here, it was statewide. So do you see any things that could take place that would alleviate that, make it go quicker?
It's a fair point. One of the things I hope to do tomorrow actually is start having a conversation with my colleagues from, at least in the northern region, is about what are the issues with the provisional ballot process just from a processing standpoint, and what are the things that we could recommend to the Department of Elections to help make that process go easier, because so much about it is this manual process that you then have to go in multiple times and make changes. It's just a very manual process right now, and I think there might be a way to if, like I said, even if precincts just type the name into a system, that would save us from having to type the name into a system. So it's tiny things like that.
That'll add also, there was an extra long this year because the deadline to have your absentee ballots is normally the noon Friday after the election, and then Friday this year was Veterans Day. So they had till noon Monday, so that pushed down an additional 2 days. And I think for the same days, we were waiting on a report from the state, and that wasn't available until Saturday afternoon. And then we had 2,000 processed on Sunday and Monday.
Yeah. But I think there might be, and what the Department of Elections has made very clear is that this is our first time with same-day registration. We're all going into it somewhat blind, not really knowing what to expect. And so they were very clear that this will be kind of an iterative process where we'll be making changes on it based on the data that we gather from this election. So,
Madam Chair, that's a good question. It leads me to ask, with respect to the mail ballots, even given the deadline that this time went over to Monday, did you have any mail ballots that arrived after Monday?
Yeah.
Sense of how many?
I think it's at 50 right now. Keep in mind, we can get ballots for up to a year after an election. Usually it's just a trickle, but the stack back there is about that big, so it looks like 50 at this point.
And how does that compare to last year?
Sorry, I'm looking for Ben if he's in here. He is not in here anymore. I don't
About.
know. Yeah, I don't know, because we pack them up and send them over to the clerk of the court.
All right. Yes, I'd be curious
Yeah,
just to see how that
yeah, I'll
is.
make a note.
And what is your latest experience in terms of the mail delivery service and time it takes when something's sent within the county?
Yeah. I think it is moving much better than it was during 2020. So we are, like I said, the post office has changed their delivery timeframes. It went from 2 to 5 days even internally. So that's just standard timeframes. What we are seeing is that they are actually delivering within their standard delivery timeframes. I was pretty surprised. This year we used a vendor to print and mail our mail ballots for us, and the turnaround time with them I was very pleased with. So voters usually had their ballots within 4 days, because the vendor just had the ability to take ballots directly to a processing center, so they went straight from Albany to Maryfield to Arlington, which is faster than us taking them to Arlington, because even if we did deliver them, it would have to go Arlington, Maryfield, then back to Arlington.
Right.
But getting them straight to a processing center that could get to Maryfield, it actually went much faster. So it is getting better.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I think whoever replaces me should expect to spend most of the weekend after the election.
I do, yeah.
Adjudicating provisions.
So that was one of the state recently sent around the job description for electoral board members. And that was one of the comments from one of my colleagues in a neighboring jurisdiction, is that they really need to add in a statement that they need to be available for the week after the election.
Yeah.
So
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I actually took the week off of work and I was like, don't call me, don't text me,
Yeah.
it's election week.
yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So I just have one last thing before we move into closed session. And that is, Frank, thank you for your reminder email about the election officer affiliations. So, yes, I think we need to figure out how we're going to do this so that the parties can provide their list to the Board of Elections by February.
I'd like to add my thanks to Frank as well. And I also want to thank John for being here. And congratulations on receiving the Republican Party's highest award, the Hilda Griffith Award. I've been around long enough. I've actually knew Hilda Griffith. And you certainly earned that and spent much of your time earning that with us. And so we appreciate that. Congratulations.
Okay, so convene closed session. Do you want us to leave or?
Oh, no, we want to.
No. I'm talking about, should we leave or should we take everyone?
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's probably easier if you left.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have everyone stay in here and then we can,
Yeah.
we'll be back.
Do you have any idea how long it might be?
I do not, but we have hot chocolate and buntinis to keep you, and Tate's gonna practice her stand-up routine for you.
All right. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and move that we go into closed session. I move that the electoral board go into closed session pursuant to State Code Section 2.2-3711A, I, and 35 for the purposes of discussing issues related to appointment and performance of officers of election, personal matters not related to public business, and security related to the locality voter registration system, security scan.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we will be back.
I'm gonna put this on mute so that way people online don't hear all the chitter chatter.
Thank you to everyone for your patience. We have a quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and announce us out of executive session. out of the closed session, I mean. So I move that the electoral board return to public session and certify that only public business matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements by Virginia law, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Like, Matt's not even gone yet. and we're right away.
Okay, so again, thank you all for your patience. We are now back in our public meeting. And I guess we can go ahead and talk about what we were.
Yes.
Yeah, so we are going to, we are preparing for election officer appointments. The electoral board will not do that until February of next year. But in light of recent guidance from the Department of Elections, our office cannot appoint somebody to represent a political party. So one of the things we're going to do here in the next few weeks is, sooner rather than later, is that we will be contacting all of our election officers to let them know that we're first going to work with both party chairs to make sure that we have adequate information from them. But we'll be reaching out to our election officers and letting them know that if they want to be nominated to represent a political party, that they will need to contact the political party of their choice, and we'll let them know how to do that, and ask to be placed on that political party's nomination list. Both political parties have until 10 days before the February meeting to get us the names of nominations of people who have applied with them, so that we can prepare a list of nominations that the electoral board can approve next February. We're also going to put this information on our website, on our application, so that if anybody wants to represent a political party, they'll be told to go ahead and contact the political party and ask to be put on their nomination list. Let's see, and so this takes care of that first initial February assignment, to make sure that we don't have a hard cutoff, or that we don't have the parties scrambling to get a list of nominations to us. The electoral board decided that they would have kind of a rolling deadline of 10 days before the next board meeting, whenever that should be, so that if a political party had a list of nominations, they could go ahead and send us that list of nominations 10 days in advance of the electoral board meeting, so that they could be considered for appointment to election officers. Okay?
Oh, throughout the year.
Throughout the year. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's a very good summary. And I think it's good and appropriate to mention that these were thoughtfully deliberated decisions and were unanimous on our part. I think showing our commitment to upholding the code, welcoming as many people as possible as election officials, and giving them the opportunity to sign up, preferably in time for us to have our first batch of appointments made as required by law, but also given that people can discover an interest or be recruited to do it throughout the course of the year. It's fair to them, and that will help us, probably particularly this year, in advance of the largest need that we have in our 4-year cycle for election officials being 2024.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's a good approach, given the poorly written way 24.2.115 is drafted, and kind of assigning different roles and responsibilities of the elections office, electoral board, and the parties. And obviously, we want more people to be involved in the process. And while recognizing that really the only thing we officially do is actually appoint people off of the list, we're not really involved in any sort of interaction necessarily. I think putting notice on the website will be helpful, hopefully. And having a rolling process will allow, I think, be helpful for the parties, but also allow us to recruit and appoint people as needed. While also recognizing, if you're applying in September and you're applying for the November election, we may already be staffed up and they may not be assigned, but obviously we could take their appointments. So think it's a good approach.
And on assignments, can you elaborate with respect to the codes wording with respect to primaries? Whether they be dual or single?
Yeah, so when it comes to staffing a primary, the way the code is written is that preference will be given to officers that have been nominated by that party's primary in the event of a single party primary. It doesn't mean that we're restricted to only using officers nominated by that political party in the event of a single party primary, but it does mean that preference would be given. So in the event of a dual primary, obviously, we would be, showing preference to both political parties, so. And at this point, like I said, we don't know which primaries we're having next year. I think it's likely a Democratic primary.
Yes.
I think all signs are go for a Democratic primary at least.
Great choice.
Well, we need 3 candidates, 4 candidates. We need 4 candidates.
And the Republican committee will have to, see if either or anything, will have to make its choice at either its January or February meeting with respect to its process over which it has control, countywide for the county board and constitutional officers.
Yeah.
And then appoint the legislative, if they haven't already been appointed, appoint the legislative and senatorial district members for them to make the decisions with respect to the General Assembly.
But my understanding that it's not, the overseas ballot requirement doesn't go into account until 2024, is that?
Correct. Yes.
So that's the big onerous thing that would be put on a party if they wanted to do their own primary at some point, right?
That it will effectively need to be a primary.
Or a convention with absentee voting. That'd be difficult to do.
Yeah.
That's going to make ranked choice voting look easy.
Yes, and I just also want to add, just make sure when you do give the electoral board the names, that they have completed the application.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for the thoughtful deliberations. We appreciate that. And we're ready. We have some really good people with wordsmithing ability. That letter, it was interesting, was Dominique and John and I. And Dominic said this the last time you're going to ask John and I to work with you on a letter because they're big wordsmiths, very good, very thoughtful. So if we could have a look at whatever draft comes about, we'd be happy to.
And I would say to you, that is what Matt and I learned in law school. As opposed to attorneys.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is read and write. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's it.
Yeah.
And thank you all for being here.
Right.
And above all, thanks to you.
All right. So it is 6:26 p.m. I'm going to call the meeting officially adjourned. Thank you all for coming tonight. Matt, thank you so much for your